The story opens at Ishiyama High School, known as the most dangerous high school in the country. Here, Oga, a first-year student, faces a challenge from Abe, a powerful second-year student. Despite the challenge, Oga pays no attention to his opponent, as he is busy taking care of Beel, a small baby. Abe, eager to fight, tries to separate the baby from Oga, but Beel cries intensely, releasing an electrical charge that affects everyone in the vicinity. After these events, Oga meets his best friend, Furuichi, who details how he met Beel during a confrontation with thugs near a river. In an attempt to drown the leader of the thugs in the water, a mysterious individual named Elaine appears and splits himself in half to free Beel. Elaine then retreats, leaving Beel alone with Oga. Although Oga tries to interact with the baby, Beel shows his malicious side by being a criminal. Surprisingly, this leads to Beel becoming deeply attached to Oga, determined not to be separated from him. Upon relating this story to Furuichi, the latter cannot believe what Oga tells him and tries to return the baby to where he was found. However, Beel cries again, generating another electric charge. At this, Oga tries to move through the school corridors without disturbing Beel to prevent her from crying, but the baby uses her electric charge again. This causes Beel to cause a stir in the school every time she cries. Faced with the situation, Oga decides to put the baby to sleep in order to return it to Elaine, and thus avoid the responsibility of caring for Beel. So Oga sets off for the Ishiyama school canteen in order to feed the baby and get him to sleep more quickly. Upon arrival, Oga witnesses several students fighting over the last available portion of food. In an unexpected twist, Beel decides to throw the food into the air, causing a fight between the students over the food. The action fills Beel with joy as she observes this chaos, while Oga questions the true nature of this peculiar baby. After this, Oga goes to Furuichi's house with the intention of asking him to look after Beel. However, his friend immediately rejects the request. Beel's reluctance to part with Oga threatens to show the baby the abyss of hell, but this tactic only makes Beel more emotional and increases his affection for Oga. At that moment, Hilda, a female servant of Beel's, appears and tries to take the baby away. Beel refuses to part with Oga, which causes her to electrocute everyone with her electric charge. Hilda reveals herself to be a demon in the service of Beelzebub Roman III, the future demon king sent to destroy humanity. She also reveals that Elaine, a mysterious subject, is a dimensional transfer demon who saw potential in Oga. Faced with Oga's refusal to be the adoptive father, Hilda decides to kill him and chases him through the city. She summons her pet demon Aku, but Oga easily defeats her. Despite Hilda's attempts to kill Oga near a river, Beel goes mad at the sight of blood and generates a powerful electrical charge. Oga manages to calm Beel down and decides to say goodbye to him. But at that moment, a steel tower begins to fall due to the baby's lightning. Oga connects with Beel, and together they unleash an enormous demonic power that destroys the steel tower. Hilda is amazed at Oga's extraordinary ability, while he faints after using Beel's demonic energy. After being unconscious for 2 days, Oga regains consciousness in his room, where he is greeted by Hilda. She informs him that from now on, they will work together to raise Beel for the purpose of bringing about the destruction of humanity. The next day, Oga decides to take Beel to the school laboratory in the company of Furuichi, with the intention of having the baby choose between a stuffed animal and a stuffed animal. During this process, Furuichi notices that Beel's tastes differ significantly from those of an ordinary baby, showing a preference for things considered bad. Concerned by this revelation, Oga decides to leave the choice to Furuichi. However, Beel follows Oga crying and electrocutes him. Faced with this situation, Furuichi asks Oga why he does not leave the baby at home instead of taking him to school. Oga explains that Hilda now lives with him and has been accepted by his family, who believe that Oga and Hilda are Beel's parents. In a moment alone, Hilda warns Oga that Beel cannot be separated from him, as he will cry and electrocute him. She also reveals that the further away, the more powerful the electric charge will be, and if Beel moves more than 50 feet away from Oga, the electricity will become deadly and could kill him. At this revelation, Furuichi realizes that Oga is in serious trouble. At that moment, some bullies from the school decide to kidnap Beel in order to defeat Oga for the first time. Meanwhile, Oga is disturbed to realize that they and Beel are almost 15 meters away from him. Oga admonishes them, warning them not to take another step. At that moment, the Sonata brothers, famous thugs, appear with the intention of defeating Oga, followed by the arrival of Abe and another thug named Goodnight. In the presence of these new adversaries, the original thugs are frightened and choose to watch as Oga confronts them, following Oga's orders to stay close. Oga manages to defeat Abe and Goodnight with a single punch, leaving the Sonata brothers stunned. Faced with the threat of these thugs, they decide to use weapons to confront Oga, but he defeats them both with a single, simultaneous blow. After the confrontation, Ogre recovers Beale by beating the thugs who tried to kidnap him. Later in the evening, Ogre returns home to find that Hilda has prepared dinner, establishing a harmonious relationship with Oga's family to the point of being fully accepted. This situation surprises Oga, who did not expect such a change. Determined to take a break from his responsibilities with Beale, Oga opts to take a bath. However, his attempt at relaxation is interrupted by the appearance of Elaine, who joins Oga in the bath and informs him of the real distance between him and the baby. This situation means that Oga cannot fully relax in Elaine's company. At the end of the bath, Elaine breaks in half and brings with him Furuichi, who was worried about Oga. In the middle of the conversation, the question arises as to why Beale has chosen Oga out of all the people in the world. Elaine responds by explaining that, as a demon lord, Beale is only interested in individuals with great strength, who are rude, defiant, and have no regard for others. Understanding this, Ogre reflects on the need to find someone even tougher than him in order to free himself from the responsibility of caring for Beale, allowing the baby to become attached to someone else and take his attention away from Oga. In the underworld, the demon lord Beelzebub is divided with several demons. At one point, one of his servants informs him that Oga is responsible for looking after his son. Beelzebub rejoices to note that Oga seems to be a rather rough person. Later, he remembers that he forgot to deliver Beale's favorite toy, so he orders it to be delivered immediately. Back with Oga, problems persist with Beale, who unexpectedly relieves herself on Oga's head. Meanwhile, Hilda arrives at the school to track down Beale and deliver her favorite toy. However, the school bullies seek to confront her, causing Hilda to defeat the delinquents and eventually reunite with Oga. At that moment, Beale was on the verge of tears, about to release her electric charge. However, Hilda shows her favorite toy, calming Beale down immediately. Beale begins to play with her toy, allowing Oga a brief respite. Hilda then asks Oga if he has found someone stronger and tougher than him, to which Oga replies in the negative. Hilda suggests that someone should take charge of Ishiyama School, prompting Oga to go to the school's headmaster for help. Upon arriving at the headmaster's office, Oga realizes that the headmaster is an ordinary man, prompting him to continue his search of the school for someone who can take care of the demon baby. Meanwhile, Beale cries and hurts Oga and Furuichi with her electricity due to her hunger. Hilda decides to go to the school canteen to buy cow's milk for Beale, but a fight between students causes the milk to fall on the floor, causing Beale to cry loudly and causing great destruction. After these events, Oga decides to have a moment alone with Beale to convey to him the idea that a man should not cry so easily. He explains to her that tears have the power to wash away pain and suffering, becoming weapons when they are really needed. Oga asks Beale not to cry whenever the occasion arises. However, the conversation is interrupted when the Sonata brothers show up on a motorbike and kidnap Beale. Oga, with his great speed, begins to follow them, urging the baby not to shed tears. Beale decides to hold back her emotions. At that moment, Elaine appears to help Oga using his dimensional transfer ability, teleporting in front of the Sonata brothers to stop them. After this confrontation, Oga is reunited with Beale and again uses demonic energy to defeat the Sonata brothers in a single blow, returning home with Beale. However, Beale's favorite toy breaks at that moment, causing the baby to start crying and causing trouble for Oga again. At night, Oga experiences a dream in which Beale has grown enormously, turning into a giant monster that wreaks havoc when he cries due to a lack of food. This dream leaves Oga completely frightened when he wakes up, and he realizes the urgency of finding a replacement stronger and tougher than himself. Hilda provides Oga with special food for Beale, instructing him that the baby must be fed 5 times a day to avoid crying. Determined, Oga takes the food to school, but on the way, he notices that Beale begins to cry, triggering chaos once again. To calm the baby, he gives her food right then and there, but accidentally forgets to put Beel's food on the floor as he continues on to school. Once at school, Oga begins to receive electric shocks from Beel, who demands his food. At this point, Elaine introduces himself to the boys and reveals that he is now living in Furwich's house, as he feels a strong connection to him from his previous experience. Despite the confusion in the interpretation of Elaine's words by Furwich's family, they allow him to stay in their house. Furwichi is upset by the situation, but Oga, focused on finding food for Beel, ignores his friend's problems. Elaine, trying to help, proposes to obtain breast milk, first from her own breasts and then from Furwich's. Getting no results, Oga decides to go to the canteen but finds no food. He then goes to the vending machines, where he buys some yogurt and stops some thugs from buying the drink. They get angry but are easily defeated by Oga. The bullies reveal that they were planning to buy the yogurt for Kanzaki, a dangerous third-year bully leader known for sending many people to the hospital with his kicks. Upon learning of this, Oga decides to search for Kanzaki to become Beel's father. During his search, Oga asks his followers about him in order to locate him quickly. Meanwhile, Kanzaki is with his bodyguard Shiro and his follower loyal Natsu, discussing about Oga and how they should get rid of him, as he has caused a lot of commotion in the school. Kanzaki kicks Shiro hard due to his doubts about whether his leader can defeat Oga, forcing him into silence. However, the meeting is interrupted when Oga shows up at Kanzaki's base to accomplish his goal. Upon seeing him, Oga is pleased to note that Kanzaki appears to be a dangerous subject. One of Kanzaki's followers tries to threaten Oga, but Beel is disappointed to see that he is weak and ignores him. The follower tries to attack Oga and Beel, but is quickly stopped by Shiro, who decides to confront Oga on his own. In another instance, Oga is immersed in thoughts about how to deliver Beel to Kanzaki. At that moment, Furwichi appears with the intention of saving his friend, suggesting that he and Oga are there to offer their services to Kanzaki instead of fighting. However, Shiro is reluctant to accept Oga so readily into Kanzaki's gang, as he still does not trust him. At this point, Kanzaki proposes that Shiro test Oga's strength right away, and Shiro agrees to face Oga. However, Oga decides to knock Shiro out with a single punch to the jaw in a matter of seconds. Kanzaki congratulates Oga and accepts him into the group, but Shiro comments that the fight is not over yet. Kanzaki then kicks Shiro, indicating that he is no longer useful to him. Oga is pleased to see the full evilness of Kanzaki. Shiro reveals to Kanzaki that Oga is hiding something from him, which worries him for his leader. With all his might, Shiro stands up again. Witnessing this, Kanzaki tests Shiro's loyalty by ordering him to jump out of the living room window, leaving everyone shocked. Angrily, Oga punches Kanzaki and decides that he cannot be Beel's surrogate father. Kanzaki tries to use his special kick, but Oga stops him with one arm. Using Beel's demonic energy, Oga throws Kanzaki out of the window and defeats him with a single blow, surprising everyone and making Beel happy. In the end, Oga realizes that his attempt to get rid of Beel has failed once again. At night, Oga again experiences a dream in which he finds himself in the middle of an ocean. Realizing that it is a dream, he forces himself to wake up quickly. Upon waking up, Oga discovers that his house is flooded because Beel won't stop urinating. Confused, Oga wonders what is going on. Hilda assures him not to worry, as Beel's urine is clean and possesses sacred magical powers. However, Oga learns that Beel is generating a considerable amount of urine capable of flooding an entire city. He asks Hilda to do something about it. Hilda is forced to place a seal on Beel to temporarily send his urine to an alternate dimension. However, she informs Oga that this seal will only last for a maximum of 3 hours, so he must find a solution quickly. Oga notices that Elaine is watching an advertisement for mystical diapers, so he decides to go to the supermarket in search of these diapers for Beel in order to prevent a flood in the city. At the shop, Oga meets Natsu, who informs him that he has defeated Kanzaki, one of Ishiyama's Tohoshinki, the 4 most powerful guys in the school. Natsu warns Oga about the problems he could face by defeating one of them, but Oga ignores him, concentrating on finding a suitable nappy for Beel. He discovers that the mystical diapers he was looking for are out of stock. Meanwhile, Natsu leaves the shop to take a shopping trolley to the exit. 4 criminals enter and take the customers, including Hilda and Furuichi, hostage. The situation attracts the attention of the police, who surround the shop to prevent the criminals from escaping. Oga, seizing the opportunity, begins to interrogate the criminals about their criminal lives to determine if they could be surrogate parents for Beale. Each criminal recounts their misdeeds, but the leader becomes angry when he realizes that they have committed more nonsense than crimes. He starts beating them and shooting around to intimidate the hostages. Beale, attracted by the gun, has his seal attacked on it. The leader decides to take the baby hostage to avoid capture. At this point, Hilda proposes to help the leader escape if Oga is willing to be Beale's father. However, Oga decides to act, defeats the thieves in one blow, and Beale's seal is broken, causing a flood in the marketplace. Oga asks Hilda to do something, and she summons Aku to take them to the ocean, where they allow Beale to urinate and prevent the flood in the city. At night, Beale cries again, preventing Oga from falling asleep. To calm him down, Oga decides to play heavy metal music for him, hoping that this will soothe him to sleep. However, Oga accidentally unplugs the headphone cable, generating a loud noise throughout the house and attracting the attention of his sister, who appears to reprimand him. Subsequently, Beale wakes up again and starts crying, electrocuting Oga. The next day, Oga faces threats from several thugs who notice his strange behavior. We discover that Oga has spent the night without sleeping, keeping his eyes open. When Abe and Goodnight try to attack him in his sleep, Oga quickly awakens and easily defeats them. He then retreats to the rooftop to meet Furuichi, at which point Oga notices a strange mark on his right hand. Surprised, Hilda and Elaine explain that it is the Zebel spell, a symbol of the contract between Oga and Beale, allowing Oga to contain the baby's powers. Elaine reveals that the mark will grow with each of Oga's battles, and as Beale grows fonder of him, urging him to continue fighting. Oga, however, decides to abandon violence to get rid of the Zebel spell and free himself from Beale. This decision surprises Furuichi, who is unconsciously beaten by Oga as he expresses his skepticism. After this encounter, Oga crosses paths with the Sanada brothers, but this time he decides to refrain from violence, expressing his new stance against it. The surprise of the brothers is evident when they hear these words coming from Oga. After school, Oga looks for Beale near the river to remind him of the importance of keeping promises. He asks the baby to avoid crying as long as he is not involved in fights. Later, Oga is harassed by several thugs who try to ambush him, but he chooses to escape and swim across the river instead of resorting to violence. Elsewhere, Hilda and Furuichi cross paths by chance and decide to walk home together. However, they are ambushed by a group of thugs who knock them unconscious and take them to one of the Tohoshinki, named Haimkawa. Haimkawa, the son of an influential businessman, has hired criminals to kidnap Hilda, who, due to the drugs administered, is unable to move normally. Haimkawa uses Hilda as bait to lure Oga and communicates with him through Furuichi's phone, asking him to come to his hideout. Hours later, in Haimkawa's lair, Elaine appears, who splits in two to reveal that Oga is inside him. Oga defeats several of Haimkawa's followers, demonstrating his sense of justice. Despite the resistance of Haimkawa, who has a steel band around his stomach, Oga delivers a powerful blow thanks to the Zebel spell. He uses this power to defeat the Tohoshinki while teaching Beale the importance of protecting friends in dangerous situations. After this confrontation, Oga notices that the Zebel spell has grown considerably due to his numerous battles. After several days, Oga manages to reduce the size of the Zebel brand by spending a whole week playing video games and avoiding conflicts with bullies. Hilda, annoyed by his behavior, breaks Oga's console but offers him toys for him and Beale. Together, they build a cage, which turns out to be a device for imprisoning demonic monsters. Oga, accidentally activating it, becomes trapped with Hilda, depending on Beale to free himself. Beale, though awakened, proves inept at solving the cage puzzle, infuriating Oga, who activates the Zebel spell. Despite destroying the cage, the Zebel spell grows again, forcing Oga to go 3 days without wrongdoing. Later, Furuichi notices that Oga has brought dangerous toys for Beale. Activating a chest, they all receive doctor's outfits, and Oga decides to use the situation to diminish the Zebel spell's mark by treating the wounded. However, demonic instruments cause chaos in the school infirmary. Upon discovering a device in Beale's head, Oga activates it, healing everyone and reducing his mark. However, accidentally activating a toy bomb, Ogre regrows into Zebul's spell as he confronts the criminals again. After a few days, in a new scene, Natsu and Shiro visit Kanzaki and Haimkawa in the hospital. They inform them that Kunieda, one of the 4 Tohoshinki members, will soon return to Ishiyama, along with other girls from the school. Natsu comments that changes are coming to Ishiyama. On the other hand, Oga and Beale begin to share time with the family. At this point, Oga's mother suggests that both Oga and Hilda should take Beale to the debut in the park. This event involves meeting the community of parents with babies in the park, exchanging information, seeking advice, and allowing the baby to socialize and make friends. Oga's mother mentions that her own park debut experience was ruined by Oga when he was a very aggressive baby. After hearing this, Hilda urges Oga to make the park debut with Beale, as she will be busy watching a soap opera. Because of this, Oga chooses to go to the park with Furuichi and Beale. However, Furuichi decides to wander around in an attempt to find an attractive girl, leaving Oga alone with Beale. The baby asks Oga to throw him, as parents usually do with their children. Oga, in an impulsive act, throws Beale far away, forcing him to chase him quickly so as not to exceed the allowed distance. After a few moments, Oga manages to catch the baby in mid-air. At that moment, Oga notices the presence of a group of mothers nearby and decides to strike up a conversation to participate in the debut in the park. However, both Oga and Beale adopt mischievous expressions, frightening the mothers, who choose to flee. A mysterious girl, carrying her younger brother on her back, approaches Oga fearlessly, and he decides to make his debut in the park with her. They try to have ordinary conversations about babies, and Elaine appears to provide them with demonic toys. Eventually, Oga and the girl lose sight of the babies, which leads them to search for them in the park. Oga finally finds them after considerable effort. The girl recognizes that Oga is not as bad as he seems. However, the previously frightened mothers return with a policeman, considering Oga a suspect. The policeman mistreats Oga and, subsequently, the girl when she tries to intervene. Faced with this situation, Oga decides to kick the policeman in the crotch and place him in a bin, forcing Oga and Beale to escape from the park to avoid further trouble. After this incident, the girl returns to her home, a large temple, where she is greeted by several subordinates. It is revealed that this girl is Kunieda, a member of the 4 Tohoshinki. She chooses to return immediately to Ishiyama School with the intention of teaching Oga a lesson because of all the trouble he has caused. After some time, Oga and Furuichi arrive at the school and notice that the Ishiyama girls have returned, which fills Furuichi with joy. Furuichi then suggests to Oga that they should find Queen Kunieda soon to appreciate her beauty, taking him along as he searches the school grounds for Kunieda. Meanwhile, Kunieda moves through the school corridors in the company of his most loyal followers, commanding respect and avoiding any confrontation. In one incident, Abe tries to behave inappropriately, but Chiaki, one of Kunieda's followers, skillfully defeats him with pressurized water guns. Later, Goodnight challenges Kunieda to a fight on the condition that if he wins, she must go on a date with him. Nin, Kunieda's right-hand man, is about to confront Goodnight, but Kunieda intervenes using his wooden sword, keeping the fight going. Kunieda continues his search for Oga, as he has been wreaking havoc in his absence, sending numerous people to the hospital and taking part in various incidents. On his way, he encounters Kanzaki and Haimkawa, who initially seem to want revenge, but decide to welcome him back and leave. Later, Furuichi and Oga meet Kunieda, who notices Oga but realizes that he does not recognize her. Beale, however, seems to remember her. Kunieda becomes nervous as he engages Oga in a duel, using his wooden sword to attack him. Despite his special techniques, Oga survives and notices Beale's admiration for Kunieda. In an unexpected twist, Oga asks Kunieda to be Beale's mother, which causes Kunieda to become confused and nervous, revealing his growing feelings for Oga. Later, Furuichi expresses his displeasure towards Oga, thinking that he was flirting with Kunieda. However, Oga reveals his true intention. He plans to have Kunieda take care of Beale, as the baby was impressed with the girl's strength. On the other hand, Nin confronts Kunieda and asks him about his feelings for Oga. Kunieda's answer reveals that she doesn't think Oga is as bad as he seems, and her response leaves her blushing. Nin, realizing that Kunieda is starting to like Oga, reminds her of the rule of Ishiyama's women's group, Red Tails: no boyfriends. If a member has a boyfriend, she must resign from the group. Despite this, Kunieda assures Nin that she has no plans to leave the Red Tails. Meanwhile, a group of gang members known as MK5 appear before Oga, Furuichi, and Hilda with the intention of assaulting them. However, Oga and Hilda team up to fight the thugs, defeating them with relative ease, leaving the students watching the scene in awe. Kunieda, witnessing the fight, learns that Oga and Hilda are supposedly married, which arouses jealousy in her, leading her to leave the scene. As Oga and Furuichi discuss the plan for Kunieda to stay with Beale, they are interrupted by Natsu, who is surprised to learn of Oga's fight with Kunieda. Hilda, on the other hand, seeks a confrontation with Kunieda to gauge her strength as Beale's potential adoptive mother. During the brief fight, Hilda recognizes Kunieda's strength, although she still does not consider her as powerful as Oga. Kunieda attempts to continue the fight, but is stopped by her followers, who inform her about Nin and Chiaki, apparently injured by Oga. Believing Oga to be responsible, Kunieda decides to confront him on the roof of the school. In the midst of the confrontation on the rooftop, Oga, not understanding why Kunieda is so upset, decides to resist her attacks without fighting back. Meanwhile, Nin wakes up and learns that Oga and Kunieda are fighting. In a flashback, it is revealed that Oga ignored Nin's challenge to a duel in the past, as he had a problem with Beale to deal with. Returning to the present, Nin is stopped by MK5, who reveal that they attacked the girls on the orders of their leader, Miwa, in order to provoke the fight between Oga and Kunieda. Natsu intervenes to stop MK5 and allow Nin to reach the rooftop to explain the misunderstanding to Kunieda. Upon learning the truth, Kunieda is shocked and tries to apologize to Oga. However, he reveals that he received the blows in the hope that Kunieda would accept Beale in the end. Hilda intervenes, declaring that Kunieda is not yet superior to Oga, thus foiling Oga's plan to make Kunieda Beale's mother. After a few days, Oga decides to buy a fish kibble for Beale. However, just as he is about to give a piece to the baby, a stray cat appears and steals the kibble from the protagonist. Despite Oga's initial threat, the cat seems to take a liking to him and decides to stay by his side. Oga is forced to take the cat home, where Beale begins to experience jealousy due to the closeness between Oga and the new guest. Surprisingly, the cat also establishes a connection with Hilda, further intensifying Beale's jealousy. The situation becomes more complicated when Beale decides to challenge the cat to a fight in the park. Oga and Hilda chose to observe the confrontation. To everyone's surprise, the cat easily defeats Beale. Later, a gang of stray cats appears, threatening Beale and the cat for invading their territory. Despite Hilda's intervention, Oga asks them to wait a moment. The cat, initially frightened, is given determined protection by Beale, who shows courage in the face of the gang of cats. Impressed by Beale's determination, Oga chases the gang away, praising Beale for her lack of fear. Observing the connection that forms between Beale and the cat after the incident, Beale decides to teach the cat to be more intimidating with his gaze in order to overcome his fears. After that, Oga is forced to take both Beale and the cat to the children's play center. Once there, he meets Kunieda, whom he fails to recognize as she is not dressed as a student and treats her like the girl he met in the park. Meanwhile, Beale and the cat play with Koda, participating in a duel to build a tower taller than the other children. However, an explosion occurs due to one of Beale's toys, resulting in victory for Beale's team. Beale and Koda celebrate, while the cat looks on in admiration. On the other hand, Oga decides to take Beale and the cat away from the play center to avoid possible trouble. On the way, a gang of stronger cats threatens the gang that tried to attack Beale and the cat. The cat decides to intervene and uses his intimidating stare, causing the stronger gang of cats to flee in complete panic. After this incident, the cat decides to say goodbye to Oga and Beale, as he has plans to make friends of his own. Thus, Beel and the cat have a sad farewell. After a few days, we watch as Haimkawa disperses money to various individuals in order to obtain information about Oga and carry out his desire for revenge against him. He then devises a plan to lure the woman away from the dining room, allowing her to supply Oga with expired food in order to weaken him and satisfy his desire for revenge. On the rooftop, Hilda intervenes by holding Oga and bringing him food for Beel, as well as an underworld breakfast for him. However, Fioruichi, feeling jealous, asks Oga for a chance to taste the food prepared by Hilda. Oga readily agrees, which causes Fioruichi to fall to the ground after tasting a demonic meal. Oga then consumes the bread he bought in the dining room, which pleases Haimkawa from afar. However, Oga reveals that having tasted food from the underworld, he has developed an immunity to any bad food, thwarting Haimkawa's plan. Haimkawa decides to find another method to defeat Oga. He hires criminals in disguise to attract Beel's attention and use him as a hostage. A guy disguised as Gohan, an anime character, appears, but Beel notices the fake due to the wrong color of chopsticks and Oga defeats him with one blow. Later, Haimkawa tries to seduce Fioruichi through a man disguised as a woman, but Elaine intervenes, revealing the truth and taking Haimkawa and his followers to a deserted island. Haimkawa is left in debt and decides to trick Oga by disguising himself as Gohan, but his disguise is quickly discovered and Oga defeats him decisively. After these events, Haimkawa, in his quest for revenge, notices that several individuals from another school are about to make a surprise attack on Oga. The presence of these non-Ishiyama students infuriates Haimkawa as an intrusion into his school's territory. In a rage, Haimkawa decides to take on all the attackers with all his skills. However, after a while, Kanzaki wakes him up and offers him a leftover yogurt from the vending machine. At that point, Haimkawa chooses to postpone his revenge against Oga until later. After a few days, Beel begins to experience episodes of crying at night, generating a din that disturbs the sleep of Oga's entire neighborhood. Faced with this situation, Oga tries to find a solution to the problem, while his father tries to apologize to the annoying neighbors. Despite his efforts, the crying persists, affecting the sleep of everyone in the family. In an attempt to calm Beel, Oga decides to give him a hot bath, but Hilda reveals that in the past, Beelzebub has taken him to a magma bath, generating a rejection of hot water. Oga tries to bathe Beel with warm water, but he refuses, and an accident plunges him into hot water, causing Oga to cry and an electric shock. Oga's family, unable to sleep because of Beel's constant crying, looks for ways to cheer him up. The mother suggests that Oga sleep with Hilda and Beel, arguing that babies like to sleep with their parents. However, Hilda's interruption by getting up to go to the toilet causes Beel to wake up and cry. Oga's father is forced to apologize again to the neighbors to appease their complaints. As the problem persists, Hilda decides to look for a special toy in the underworld to calm Beel down. Meanwhile, at Ishiyama School, Oga's classmates experience strange dreams in which they try to attack him, causing chaos in the school. This all turns out to be a dream of Oga, who finally wakes up after days without sleep. Oga's mother proposes to take care of Beel and sleep with him, but Oga insists that only he can handle the situation. He takes Beel to his room, where Hilda has returned from the underworld with a toy. Although the noise of the toy is considerable, he manages to get Beel to sleep quickly, prompting further complaints from the neighbors about the commotion caused by Oga and his family. Days later, Ishiyama School announces that a skills assessment test will be held the following day. Will cover Japanese, arithmetic, science, and social studies, subjects that are not to the liking of the bullies, most of whom have no affinity for study. Later in the evening, Oga sets out to study to avoid failing the exam. However, Beel begins to scribble in his study book. In the process, the baby gets one of the pencils last, which triggers her crying and an electric shock that affects Oga. In another instance, we watch as Beelzebub amuses himself by interacting with various demons in the underworld, noting that he has not slept for an extended period. However, he decides to report on the progress of his son's mission in the human world. One of his followers reports that Beel's human father has managed to develop the Zebel spell, indicating positive progress in the mission. Upon hearing this, Beelzebub decides to test his son by sending an assessment test through Hilda. She informs Olga and Beel that they must defeat 100 humans in the next week. Hilda explains that they will receive 1 point for each person defeated, and that the test is considered a failure if they score less than 30 points. She also warns Olga that he must pass the exam, otherwise he will face a hellish punishment in a special room in the demon world with Beel. At this news, Olga reacts with great trepidation. The next day, Olga shares the situation with Furwichi and reveals that he is in serious trouble. However, the conversation is interrupted when Beel comes across a stray cat and decides to challenge it. Olga rejoices at the opportunity, as defeating 10 cats would earn Beel a point in the assessment test. However, the baby is easily defeated by the cat, resulting in a cry that electrocutes the boys. Faced with this situation, Olga comes up with the idea of leaving Beel in the care of the person who gets the best marks in the Ishiyama assessment test. In this way, he hopes to find a more qualified student than the others, who have so far been rejected by Beel. Within the school, all the students do their best to study and prepare for the test. However, both Olga and Furwichi realize that most of them lack understanding of the subjects they are studying. As the assessment test begins, Olga watches as his classmates look for ways to pass the test according to their abilities. At that moment, he realizes that the majority in his class lacks intelligence. The test is interrupted when students from the Sapon school come to Ishiyama looking for confrontation, motivated by Kanzaki's previous confrontation with them. In this situation, Olga decides to ask everyone to continue with the test while he takes care of the Sapon students in order to determine who is the smartest in Ishiyama and leave him in charge of Beel. After leaving the school, Olga, with the help of Beel, activates the Zebel spell to defeat all his opponents without difficulty. This victory ensures that Olga and Beel pass the test set by Beelzebub. The next day, Olga and Furwichi consult the results table of the assessment test in Ishiyama to identify the smartest student. However, Olga discovers that Furwichi got the highest score, which frustrates his plans, as Beel would not agree to stay with Furwichi. After this, Hilda is seen to be contemptuous of Olga and Beel as they head off to school. She then embarks on the task of getting milk from the underworld for Beel, enlisting the help of Elaine. Hilda also offers a glass of beer to Olga's father, noting that he has a very different personality from his son. However, Olga's mother appears angry to see her husband drinking so early, and Olga's father apologizes by kneeling before her to avoid trouble. Hilda is impressed by Olga's father's ability to deal with the situation. Later, she accompanies Olga's mother to the supermarket, where she begins to understand more about the human world and its inhabitants, coming to the conclusion that humans are quite self-centered. Although Hilda tries to enjoy the human television programs, the situation is interrupted when Beel cries again and electrocutes everyone. The next day, Hilda chooses to take the food to Olga and Beel at the school, where she meets the students defeated by Olga. At that moment, Furwichi informs her that Olga is out fighting several delinquents. Determined, Hilda gives the food to Furwichi to deliver to Olga later. Upon returning home, Hilda discovers that Olga's family has prepared a special meal for her, which fills her with joy. After a few hours, Hilda meets Olga again near the river, and he invites her to return home together. Meanwhile, Kanzaki engages in intense training in the park with the aim of getting stronger and defeating Olga. During a break, Shiro comes over and hands Kanzaki a yogurt. Learning that Kanzaki has come up with an idea to develop a new technique, Kanzaki puts forward the idea of performing a double top kick, but is faced with the problem of a lack of support. Shiro is left impressed, at which point Natsu appears, revealing that he has been investigating Olga and his source of power. He shows a compilation of Olga's fights since his arrival in Ishiyama, leading Shiro to the conclusion that Olga's strength comes from Beel. Shiro proposes that Kanzaki carry a dummy on his back to simulate Beel's weight, believing this to be the secret to Olga's training. Accepting the idea, Kanzaki begins rigorous training by climbing stairs with a dummy on his back. But Natsu and Shiro increase the weight to challenge him further. As they add more weight, Kanzaki is forced to stop, unable to bear the load. After a brief rest, Shiro suggests that they made a mistake by using a fake baby for training and proposes using a cat. However, the cat attacks Shiro, and his attempts with other options, such as girls, lead to trouble with the police. Shiro finally decides to dress up as a baby to help Kanzaki, who accepts the help after brief persuasion. However, Natsu interrupts by pointing out that Beale is always naked when Oga carries him, and suggesting that Shiro do so as well. Despite Shiro's willingness, they are arrested by the police upon witnessing the scene. Faced with this failure, Kanzaki asks Shiro and Natsu to leave him alone to continue his training. In another case, Beale is feeling rather bored in Oga's room, prompting Hilda to suggest that he take him for a walk in the park. To Beale's obvious boredom, Oga agrees, thus avoiding the tears and electric shocks that might follow. As they stroll, they meet Furuichi, who decides to join them in the hope of seeing attractive girls in the park. During their stay, Oga bumps into Kunieda, but being dressed differently, neither he nor Furuichi manage to recognize her. It is then that Kunieda mentions that his younger brother Kota has gone astray, leading Oga and Furuichi to offer their help in the search. On the other hand, Kanzaki meets Kota and decides to spend some time playing with him. However, Kanzaki realizes that Kota could be the baby he needs to continue his training. He begins to strengthen his body by carrying Kota on his back, noticing improvements in his reaction time and movements. During training, he watches Kota play in the grass, inspiring him to devise a new technique. At that moment, Oga, Furuichi, and Kunieda appear before Kanzaki. Despite Kunieda's expectations of being recognized as part of the Tohoshinki, Kanzaki only identifies her as Kota's mother and returns the boy to her. However, Beale and Kota establish an instant rivalry by making eye contact and asking Oga and Kanzaki to fight as their representatives. Although Oga chooses not to fight, Kanzaki uses a new technique inspired by one of Kota's moves. Although the technique fails, they decide to end the fight. Kanzaki assures Oga that he will defeat him next time, receiving praise for his new technique. Later, Oga meets Natsu and Shiro, who offer him yogurt before Kanzaki leaves the park with his followers. After these events, in a different scene, Furuichi chooses to take a bath at home. Suddenly, however, Elaine shows up with the intention of sharing a bath with him, which causes Furuichi's irritation. Because of his uncomfortable experiences, Furuichi complains to Oga the next day. He urges him to quickly find a new tutor for Beale in order to get rid of Elaine. Oga, responding, explains his efforts to do so, but points out the lack of strong individuals in Ishiyama. Furuichi then suggests that they seek out Tojo, the last member of Tohoshinki and known as the strongest student in the school. Highlighting his record of defeating dangerous students in the past, Furuichi reveals that Tojo is often absent from school, taking on odd part-time jobs to earn money. Upon this information, Oga urges Furuichi to track Tojo down. Meanwhile, the Tohoshinki members learn of Oga's intention to confront Tojo, realizing that Ishiyama will soon witness an epic fight. After a few hours, Himekawa meets Furuichi and reveals that Tojo is working on a beach to earn money. Furuichi, excited at the prospect of seeing women in swimming costumes there, thanks Himekawa for the valuable information. Meanwhile, Kunieda and the girls overhear the conversation, and Kunieda worries, believing that Oga might not be able to defeat Tojo, no matter how strong he is. The next day, Oga, Furuichi, Hilda, and Elaine head to the beach with the aim of finding Tojo at his workplace. Furuichi, excited at the prospect of seeing Hilda in a swimming costume, is disappointed to discover that she only brings a suit for Beale. Later, Oga and Furuichi go to the food shop where Tojo is employed, but are mistaken for new part-time employees and are forced to serve a crowd of customers. Despite the situation, they decide to continue working in the hope that Tojo will return soon. Meanwhile, the other members of the Tohoshinki arrive at the beach to witness the fight between Oga and Tojo. However, the shop owner informs them that Tojo was fired from his job the day before due to an altercation with some thugs. The conversation is interrupted when the thugs defeated by Tojo reappear and cause trouble for Oga and Furuichi, thinking that they are related to Tojo. Faced with this situation, Oga decides to take on the thugs himself and easily defeats them. After this encounter, Oga leaves the shop where he was working. Meanwhile, we discover that Tojo is still working on the beach and receive news that Oga is on site, ready to take him on in a fight. Tojo is excited to hear the news, as he has heard about Oga and his achievements in defeating 3 of the 4 Tohoshinki members. Back with Oga, we find him playing with Furuichi, and he accidentally knocks over Beel's sand figure. This causes Beel to cry and electrocute Oga. At that moment, Kunieda appears and meets the boys. Furuichi is disappointed to see that Kunieda has no swimming costume, just like Hilda. At that instant, a beautiful girl approaches Furuichi and hands him a note from Himekawa with Tojo's current location. Oga and Furuichi head off to find Tojo at his new job. However, the owner reports that Tojo's shift is over and he has left. Furuichi suggests that Oga write a letter of challenge to send to Tojo to locate him more quickly. Oga agrees and decides to write the letter to give to Kunieda, as she knows Tojo's face, unlike Oga and Furuichi. Kunieda is excited to think that Oga will make a confession of love to her, but he immediately clarifies that the letter is for Tojo, leaving her disappointed. After this, Kanzaki and Himekawa urge Kunieda to hurry and deliver the letter to Tojo. Despite this, Kunieda refuses, worried that Oga may be seriously injured. As she is about to tear up the letter, a follower of Tojo's appears and realizes that it is an invitation from Oga. The letter reaches Tojo, who decides to wait for Oga at the appointed place. Meanwhile, Oga heads towards Tojo, but is stopped by Miwa and the MK5. They propose to ally with Oga and his group to defeat Tojo together, to which Oga refuses and opts to take them all on by himself. However, Beel falls to the ground, starts crying, and hurts Oga. In the meantime, several gangs in the area gather with the intention of ambushing Tojo, who decides to confront them all at once. After several hours, Oga arrives at the agreed location to meet Tojo, only to find that Tojo is no longer present. Kunieda appears and informs him that Tojo defeated several gangs before deciding to withdraw when he realized that Oga would not show up. He also mentions to Oga that Tojo is not someone he can beat. However, these words only increase Oga's excitement to meet Ishiyama's strongest student. After this, Beelzebub is seen to have assigned summer chores for Beel to complete. Oga bristles at the idea that a child should be doing chores during the holidays. However, Beel unwraps the packages sent by Beelzebub, revealing demonic accessories for the baby to use. Despite Oga's resistance, he decides to call Elaine to use his portal to return the accessories to the demon world. Hilda explains to him that it is impossible to get rid of the props, and they must fulfill the tasks assigned to them. Beel is forced to use the first object, a notebook called Thrilling Notebook. By drawing a little cat on it, the drawing comes to life. The boys decide to try out the notebook to bring their own drawings to life. Then they are forced to use the second object, a collection kit. Since there are no demonic creatures in the human world, Hilda suggests hunting down delinquents in Ishiyama, as many of them attend school and have nothing to do during the holidays. So, upon arriving in Ishiyama, Oga starts hunting down all the school bullies using the demonic tools. During the search, Oga decides to follow Kunieda with the aim of capturing her, which causes her to blush as she again misunderstands his intentions. However, Kunieda manages to deftly dodge each of Oga's attacks and avoid capture. After this, the group noticed that the school was sprouting several demonic plants, which were planted by Beel, constituting the third and final accessory sent by Beelzebub. Among the plants that grew, they noticed a particularly violent and carnivorous one. This plant began to catch most of the bullies present in the school, growing even larger as it caught more individuals. Faced with this situation, Oga decided to confront the plant, but quickly realized that his blows did no harm. At this point, Hilda mentioned that she had brought several accessories, including a spear that could be used to defeat the plant. Oga and the members of the Tohoshinki began searching for the spear among the props, but the carnivorous plant dragged them away one by one. At this point, the cat created by Beel chose to sacrifice itself, providing the boys with time to find the accessory, being eaten by the plant in the process. This act provoked Beel's wrath. Oga and Beel activated their demonic power to confront the plant, managing to defeat it in a single blow and saving everyone. However, the excessive use of energy left Oga and Beel unconscious on the ground. After that, Oga began to experience an intense heat inside his house. The cause of this heat turned out to be Beel, who was ill with a pronounced fever. Oga's sister decided to inflate a small pool to bathe Beel in an attempt to alleviate his discomfort. However, Beel's condition did not improve, and the water began to evaporate. Over time, Beel's condition worsened, causing concern for both Oga and Hilda. After a while, Hilda noticed that Oga's Zebul spell disappeared and Beel fell unconscious. At that moment, she realized that the bond between Oga and Beel had been broken, which meant that the baby would not be able to release its magical power. Oga, on the other hand, was thrilled to realize that he no longer needed to be Beel's foster father. Upon hearing this, Hilda became angry with Oga and expelled him from the house, as she did not want to see him. Oga was forced to walk down the street at night, determined not to worry about Beel, as, being a demon, he would probably be fine. However, his walk was interrupted by Shoji, one of Tojo's followers, who gave Oga a powerful kick. The two began to fight, and Shoji proved to be superior to Oga. Despite this, Shoji was forced to end the fight when he received a call from Tojo, and decided to say goodbye to Oga. After these events, Oga returned home and noticed Hilda's absence. He decided to take care of Beel. However, the next day, he noticed that Beel was no longer in her room. At one point, she expressed her joy to Furuichi that she no longer had to worry about taking care of a baby. However, Oga's sister intervened and forced him to return to Hilda and Beel. Oga, feeling upset, decided to go to the river, the place where he met Beel and Elaine. There he met Tojo, who was together with Beel. Upset by this situation, Oga decided to leave, but Furuichi stopped him and asked Tojo where he had found the baby. Tojo replied that he would only tell him if Oga defeated him in a fight. Oga accepted the challenge and confronted Tojo. In the fight, Tojo sent Oga flying with a single blow, causing Shoji to believe that the fight was over. However, Oga got up and counterattacked, surprising Tojo, who decided to continue the fight. During the confrontation, Oga tore part of Tojo's shirt and discovered a Zebul spell on his shoulder, leaving Oga and Furuichi astonished. Despite this, Tojo decided to end the fight by sending Oga flying with a powerful punch. After this, Tojo withdrew, taking Beel with him. After his defeat, Oga returned home, where he was greeted by Hilda. She introduced him to Dr. Prenius Furcus and his assistant Lamia, who came from the underworld to treat Beel and cure him. Furcus explained that Beel was suffering from royal fever, a disease that manifests itself when one possesses great power. He mentioned that the bond between Oga and Beel was unconsciously severed to avoid endangering Oga, as controlling Beel's immense power could lead to Oga's death, as he was not strong enough. Lamia blamed Oga for Beel's condition, arguing that he did not grow fast enough to match the baby's strength. Oga began to believe that Beel sought a new, stronger father like Tojo, but Hilda dismissed this idea. She explained that if Beel had chosen Tojo as his new foster father, he would have released his power by now, and the fever would have disappeared. Hilda encouraged Oga not to give up, and to become stronger in order to be accepted by Beel again and settle the score with Tojo. Lamia intervened using a special gun that sent Oga to a world inside his mind by means of a spirit bullet. In this dream world, Oga would have the chance to regain his bond with Beel, but he would also face the risk of being lost and dying if he failed in his mission. Inside his own mind, Oga observes the people he meets differently and realizes that he must find Beel in this surreal world, following the advice of the Furuichi of his inner world. He progresses through his inner world, meeting various people from his academy. After 6 hours, Lamia begins to think that Oga has failed in his attempt to reconnect with Beel. However, at that moment, Oga wakes up and annoys Lamia for thinking he would fail. Hilda congratulates Oga on passing the test and mentions to him that he must now get Beel back. With determination, Oga prepares for his rematch against Tojo. After a while, Oga decides to take a bath, but his moment is interrupted by Shiro. She informs him that Kanzaki and Haimkawa have decided to take on Tojo, as the balance of power in Ishiyama crumbled after Oga defeated the 3 Tohoshinki. All the thugs rallied behind Tojo, seeing him as the only one capable of defeating Oga, resulting in Kanzaki and Haimkawa losing their followers. Kaoru, a subordinate of Tojo, easily took care of them, leading Kanzaki and Hankawa to send Shiro with Oga to form an alliance and confront Tojo. Although Oga is not interested in the alliance and prefers to seek his revenge alone, he is forced to join Kanzaki and Hankawa in tracking down Tojo. Together, they find Shoji and interrogate him to obtain Tojo's location. However, several of Ishiyama's students appear, wishing to join Tojo as followers. Shoji retreats to join Tojo, leaving Oga and the others to confront the thugs. Despite the opposition, they manage to defeat the bullies with ease and continue to advance towards the school. Arriving at the school, they are greeted by Ishiyama's students, who wish to prove their loyalty to Tojo and are ready to confront anyone who opposes him. The boys find themselves in dire straits in the face of this new threat. However, Kuniita and the other Red Tails show up to help, defeating several thugs and offering their support to Oga and the others. At this point, Kuniita uses a special technique to break through to Oga. In another instance, Tojo is at the back of the school, setting off fireworks to cheer Beal up. However, Oga makes his appearance again. At this, Tojo challenges Oga to a duel to win Beal back, in the hope that Oga will fight for real. Oga, for his part, points out that the decision to return to him rests with Beal. At that point, Beal recovers from the fever and comes to her senses, indicating that Oga has succeeded in the test to restore the bond. Oga found Beal in his inner world and helped him with his baby antics. With Beal back, Oga prepares to face Tojo again in combat. Elsewhere, Furuichi is enjoying a peaceful sleep in his room, but his rest is interrupted by Elaine. Elaine wakes him up and urges him to get ready to support his friend. Elaine dresses Furuichi and teleports him to Ishiyama, where he joins Hilda, Furcus and Lamia, who observe the impending fight between Oga and Tojo. Meanwhile, Shoji and Kaoru decide to stop Kanzaki and Hankawa, as they plan for Oga to weaken Tojo enough for them to defeat him. A 2-on-2 fight breaks out on the school grounds. Back to Oga, he decides to leave Beal out of the fight and asks him not to get involved, as it is his own fight. Beal agrees and chooses to watch. The fight between Oga and Tojo begins, and Oga uses a rear kick to take advantage. Despite connecting with several punches, Tojo holds his own. On another front, Shoji and Kaoru brutally beat Kanzaki and Hankawa, urging them to surrender. Despite the odds, the two get up again. At that moment, Natsu intervenes and defeats Kaoru easily, offering his help to the boys. In parallel, Lamia notices a firework from Tojo that hasn't exploded and is curious about it. Meanwhile, Oga takes a beating from Tojo, but doesn't give up and manages to land a powerful blow using the activated Zebel spell. Lamia accidentally ignites the firework, which heads straight for Oga. He easily stops the project with his demonic power, scolding Beal for getting involved in the fight and underestimating his ability. Beal, trusting Oga, deactivates his powers, and the fight continues. The battle comes to an end when Oga finds an opening in Tojo's defense and forcefully throws him to the ground. Oga proclaims himself Ishiyama's strongest student. Furuichi asks Tojo about the Zebel spell mark on his shoulder, and Tojo reveals that it's just a tattoo inspired by someone he admired. The boys realize that there are others with demonic contracts besides Oga. After the conflict, Beal, excited by the fight, injects a large amount of magical power into Oga's arm, who is forced to release the power in order not to die, destroying the Ishiyama school in the process. After the destruction caused by Oga, Kanzaki, Hankawa, Shoji, and Kaoru are sent to the hospital and learn that Tojo helped them escape despite being more injured than them. This revelation surprises the boys, who did not expect Tojo's benevolence. Meanwhile, Oga receives a lecture from Furuichi to destroy the school, but ignores it when he notices that Beal is afraid of a small cicada. Determined to overcome this fear, Oga prepares a special training for Beal and the insects. Kunieta, on the other hand, embarks on a journey to the Maputatsu Mountains with his grandfather. He is heading to the top to deliver an important package to the head priest of a temple. However, he gets separated from Kunieta and encounters 3 thugs capturing insects on the mountain. He advises them to stop, but the thugs ignore him. Meanwhile, Kunieta ascends the mountain with Koda, but his thoughts are interrupted when he observes Oga training Beal to overcome his fear of insects. Ogre runs into Cuniata again and recognizes her as the girl from the park. They decide to share ice cream, but Cuniata's grandfather shows up and finds out that Ogre is training. They decide to have a training fight in which the grandfather proves to be superior to Ogre. Although Ogre fights seriously, Grandpa uses a special technique from his family to defeat him. However, he realizes that his package has been stolen by the thugs and decides to get it back. The thugs set a trap, but Ogre appears, defeats them, and retrieves the package, earning the chance to have a rematch with Cuniata's grandfather. The grandfather gives his blessing to Ogre as his granddaughter's future husband, leaving Ogre confused by this unexpected declaration. After the trip to the mountains, Ogre returns home and learns that it is time for Furcus and Lamia to return to the demon world. Everyone asks Fiorucci to call Elaine, even though he wishes otherwise. Elaine splits to allow Furcus and Lamia to return, but Beel hugs Lamia's leg. Ogre and Fiorucci's attempts to separate Beel result in them all being sent to the demon world, where they discover they are in Vlad's dangerous lair. In the demon world, Lamia mentions that Furcus was able to reach Beelzebub's area, but they are in Vlad's lair. She finds Elaine severely injured for having transported more people than he could. Elaine attempts a dramatic farewell, but Ogre does not allow it, as he does not wish to stay in the demon world. Hilda contacts the boys and asks them to seek out Elaine's daughter, Angelica, for help. A wild Aku beast appears, but Beel reveals that its powers are greater in the demon world and defeats the beast with a lightning bolt. Continuing towards Angelica's house, they are stopped by a tree demon that forces Fiorucci to eat its fruits. Ogre defeats it with a kick, but a plant captures Fiorucci, making it smell horrible. After traveling for a while, they find Angelica's house,